Hi, everyone. My name is Tina Kim. I'm part of the customer success team at Zoom. I want to thank each and every one of you here at the San Mateo Conference Center, as well as those of you connecting with us virtually online. Today, I have the privilege of moderating our great panelists here, adopting as well as migrating to Zoom. We understand change isn't easy, but change is necessary in this quickly evolving environment that we live in. We have three great representatives who have gone through this journey with Zoom and is willing to go ahead and share those deep-thoughted details as well as planning strategies that made their deployment successful. We're not here to sugarcoat change management. By no means. There isn't enough unicorns and rainbows out there to do that. But we are here to go ahead and pay it forward to the next generation of Zoomers who are looking to deploy Zoom within their organizations so they are most prepared to be able to go ahead and triage any unexpected circumstances that may arise. I'd like to go ahead and first start off by having our panelists introduce themselves, tell us a little bit about the company that they're with, tell us their specific title and role within their organization, let us know what role that they played within the Zoom rollout as well as deployment, as well as knowing that change is very stressful. I've also asked them to go ahead and share their favorite flavor of ice cream, because after a long day of change management, sometimes that pint is just your go-to at the end. So let me go ahead and have Michael kick us off.
Hi, I'm Michael Alcantara. I'm with Palo Alto Networks. A little background on Palo Alto Networks. It's considered a premier next-generation cybersecurity solutions company that's known for being a disruptor in the industry and quite potentially is on the verge of another disruption. And I'm just honored to be a part of the team. I joined the company a little less than 2 years ago. I hit my 2-year mark next month, in fact. And I started the journey with Zoom at the company at around that same time frame. So the challenges that we were trying to address specifically, and I'll touch more into this deeply, but it's very typical for an enterprise that's fast growing. There were just so many tools that were already in play and specific challenges with the directions that we were taking with video collaboration in particular. Many of you will probably or are probably already experiencing this. And last one was go-to ice cream, yeah. Which is anything pistachio gelato for me.
Go ahead, Sam.
My name is Sam Bryson, and I am, name company. I work for Medallia. Medallia is a customer experience management company, kind of a category definer, and we basically deal a lot with surveys and touch points and how you interact with your customers. I joined the company about 3.5 years ago when we were at 250-ish employees. We just topped out at 1,200 employees last month. And for Zoom, I was primarily responsible for the end user side of it, so rolling out the software side, the desktop side, a little bit of help with the conference rooms, although we actually have our collaborations manager, Hamilton. He's the main one who rolled out Zoom as a platform. And we rolled it out about 3-4 months ago when we moved campuses. And favorite flavor of ice cream for me? I'm actually the manager of IT support at Medallia. And ice cream is Ben & Jerry's half-baked, right? Get the little pint. Yeah, there you go.
Hi, I'm Kelley Cruse. I work for the University of Kentucky, and I am the team lead for the learning management team. And so we manage our LMS as well as the video conferencing or web conferencing solutions. And we also have instructional designers that work on our team that help faculty adopt new strategies to teach online. And so my involvement with our Zoom adoption was that I was kind of the voice on the team. I worked with colleagues in IT, colleagues in AV services, but I was kind of the voice on the team that was there to say, we need to find a solution that helps teachers teach and students learn. And so that was kind of my voice there. We definitely were looking for something that was really easy to use. And so that was my involvement there. And then my favorite flavor of ice cream is banana.
That's a good one. Well, thank you, panelists. As you can see, we have a variety of different backgrounds and industries that are being represented on the stage. I'd really like to go ahead and take the experience before even deploying Zoom. Let's go ahead and think about what specific problems were we trying to solve for our users. Kelley, maybe you can go ahead and start with.
Sure. So the solution that we had, the first solution that we had was a tool where we really experienced a degrade in the environment over time. So if we had instructors that were teaching very long classes, let's say 3-hour classes, and all the students were connecting with cameras, even as small as 21, 22 people, really over that period of time, the environment would really start to degrade. So we needed to come up with a solution that was just better for them. We also had students that had issues connecting, and it wasn't, they were trying to connect to students all over the world. And sometimes it was even right there in Kentucky, we had trouble getting a great connection for them. So we were looking for a solution, that would work well for them. So we also were in the process of changing our learning management system. So we have 30,000 students at the University of Kentucky, and it was a huge deal to try to change our learning management system. But I knew that this change also had to occur. So first we tackled our learning management system, which was huge, and I thought people just sort of won't notice that, so I just changed something huge over here, we're gonna change this other part. We only had about 120 users. It was really for our other solution that we had at the time. So it was really steady. We'd had about 120 users really consistently over about 5 years. So I thought, those 120 people won't really notice and it'll be fine. And so we were able to go ahead and start that process. And so we looked at solutions. Do you want me to go into that?
Maybe we can go ahead and give
Sure.
Sam and
Sure.
Michael a chance. Go ahead.
So when I joined Medallia, we had just finished transitioning from WebEx to Adobe Connect. And so I came in, we were on Adobe Connect, and we were partnering with PGI, integrating the two of them for telephone solutions. And it worked okay. The biggest thing that I saw about it was that one, Flash was kind of on the way out, and it required Adobe Flash. And then two, was that we couldn't buy it fast enough. We were actually hiring so many employees a week, but we were trying to be a lean startup that we would put in a request for 20 licenses, and it would take a week and a half to get them. And then by the time we got them, we already used them. We needed another 20 and another 30. So we actually took the time to switch over to Citrix, to the GoToMeeting solution, and that went okay, but we got a lot of pushback from the field, from the professional services team, from the sales team. It wasn't quite what they wanted, and the best part about it is being a survey company, Medallia sent out a survey to its own employees saying, what do you want to use? Which is kind of like asking people, what's your favorite pizza? It's not going to go well. And sure enough, we had a complete split all the way across the board. We muddled through it for a while. We kept with GoToMeeting. And it worked okay. It worked really well. But the biggest problem that we had was we have several remote offices, and those remote offices were on calls basically 8 hours a day, 10 hours a day. They were we had a remote engineering team, we had a remote sales team, and they were always constantly looking for conference rooms. And maybe not even about 4 or 5 years ago, there really was no solution in the market that combined a video conferencing platform hardware, right, in a conference room and a desktop solution, right? Something that anybody could use mobile, anybody could use on their phone. And by the time we got to moving into our new building and really going, we have 120 conference rooms that we need to fill, we started reevaluating all the players in the market, and Zoom really stood out as they actually combined both of those platforms really, really well. So that's what we went with.
A similar situation, and I did forget to introduce what I do for a living. So I manage global telecom and AV and video conferencing solutions for Palo Alto Networks. And to put some context to this, prior to joining Palo Alto Networks, I spent almost a decade at NetApp managing global AV operations and multimedia operations there. So my experiences there were in a traditional sense with everything on-prem. And reaching a point where the company had achieved almost 14,000 employees globally, I had an opportunity to jump on board at Palo Alto Networks, which was hovering at around, I would say 3,000 plus employees at the time, and be able to take that breadth of knowledge over to start fresh. And as soon as I came on board, I immediately saw the challenges that are typical for a hyper-growth environment, where you have various tools being utilized by groups that were growing fast in their own right, and had decided to implement on their own because they didn't have the time nor the patience to wait for a solution to be brought in front of them. And some of these solutions, much like GoToMeeting, Blue Jeans, on-prem Polycom video conferencing deployment with full infrastructure at a colo, were all happening simultaneously. as you can imagine, various organizations were challenged with which one to standardize on, let alone an IT department that was struggling to kind of capture that and comprehend how to make it all interoperate. So with Blue Jeans being already in-house, we had run into specific challenges with performance. So there was already some apprehension in terms of a VCAS solution. But I wanted to take a closer look at Zoom and got the opportunity to visit your office. And I came in, and I was quite skeptical as well, you know, my background. And we got a chance to do a pilot. And this is about my 3rd month into the company. And I didn't even know the executive staff at that point. And I get this call from our CMO office. And the CMO is on the other line saying, hey, I hear you're the guy I'm supposed to go to. We have a roadshow event in Australia that's happening in 3 weeks, and our founder can't join live. I need you to connect him by video to all of the venues that we're going to support out there. And me wanting to make the right impression, I said, sure, why not? So, and at which point, contingency planning kicked in, obviously. What do I do in case things go south? Let me get our founder in the studio, make sure I get a little 15-minute recording in hand at first. But that was the opportunity to try something new, which we said, let's give Zoom a shot. So 4 different venues, one at the Sydney Opera House, another one at a bank in Sydney, and then 2 more, one in Brisbane and one in Melbourne. All 4 events went without a hitch with 4 different production teams, hooking up Zoom on the other side, either using an H323 endpoint, like a Polycom endpoint, or even a laptop that was connected to their production environment. And I watched very closely, and I thought to myself, that must be the ultimate test. And we're talking 15, 18-hour difference, live video feed with no hitches, all 4 different cities. And I was sold at that point. So we immediately started our pilot, and the rest is history.
Remember, there's no point in testing unless you're testing in production.
That's true. Well, thank you so much for sharing about like your initial concerns. I know now that we're going to go into the weed of the planning. In the very beginning, you know, there's so many different thoughts, especially Sam, I know with Medallia, sending out a survey with your user base. Like, what were your initial key strategies in regards to deploying Zoom? Like, creating that user awareness and making sure that they were going to be able to adopt as smoothly as possible?
I think the biggest thing for Medallia was making sure that we understood what the pain points were per team and per department. So for us, you know, we knew it was a solution that could pretty much solve everybody's problems, but everybody did have different problems. So for us, it was sitting down with a project management team and with the survey data and looking at looking at how we would adapt the training materials and the communications to those specific teams. So the other problem a little bit of a challenge that we had actually was that we decided we were going to roll this out prior to moving buildings, which probably not the best idea in hindsight. But it actually worked out really well in the long run because what we wanted to do was get everybody familiar with the platform first. Right? Because once they knew the desktop app and the mobile app and they were familiar with the user interface, as soon as they walked into a conference room, they immediately recognized the icons. They knew what these buttons did and how they worked and so forth. So that turned out to actually be a really big plus for us. But in terms of planning specifically, it was just a lot of laying out the groundwork for how we were going to communicate with the team members and like, for example, the sales team or the engineering team or the professional services team. Making sure that we really got on board with the leadership of those departments, right? So making sure we were reaching out not only to the executives who had already signed off and bought into the plan and said this is what we're going to do, but really sort of the next level down, those kind of VP level or next management level down who were going to be responsible for driving engagement with their team.
Kelley, I know in the education space, you don't necessarily have employees. So you have faculty and you have students. So that's got to be a different transition. So what was your strategy behind that?
So for our strategy, one of the things that I made sure that we did was whatever decision we were going to make, we had to make it before faculty left for the spring semester coming into fall, because our contract was going to expire in November for our existing tool that we were using. And so the faculty do not like it when you change things in the middle of a semester. So I knew that I wanted to make an announcement, to faculty like, hey, you guys, when you guys come back in August, we're gonna have a different solution. So that meant that I had to get our internal team on board with whatever decision, whatever change we're gonna make. I wanted to be able to announce it in early April. So we decided to go ahead and buy 500 Zoom licenses in April of 16. And because we only had 120 people using our other solution, so I thought, that's plenty. We don't need to worry about that. We'll just need 500 pro licenses. It'll be great. And so we were able to go ahead and make that announcement. And we just thought, okay, we'll plan to do training. We'll train a little bit here and there throughout the summer, but most of our faculty were away for the summer and that they would come back. But one of the things that happened for us was the fact that people found out about it and people liked it, and everybody's like, hey, go check this out. And so we actually had used up, by July, we were already using 250 of our 500 pro accounts. So I was like, oh no, what are we going to do when everyone comes back? So we weren't really sure, should we make another big announcement and tell people about this? Because, we were like, what should we do? So we actually just kind of let it happen organically and naturally, and people found the solution. And, the feedback we had was very positive.
We always love when Zoom goes viral. So Michael, it's Kelley bringing up timing since they have seasonality in education. I think you shared a little bit of story about how things kind of just fell into place. Can you go ahead and share with the audience in regards to that?
Sure, and I can pick up exactly where we left off from the moment we had that success pre-pilot. Then we decided to take on the pilot with that exact team. So the CMO organization and all the field marketing teams were our guinea pigs for the pilot, which made the pitch a lot easier in a sense from an adoption standpoint. I can pick and choose out of various organizations who were the easy sells, but the tougher ones, as Sam pointed out, would be the tactical organizations that comprise of maybe your service and support teams, internal, and so forth. And there's a little bit more convincing that goes on there, but it made it a lot easier when you have the executive staff that are already on board, that are already using the tools. And from there, it was kind of the domino effect in which people saw how easy it was at the strategic level with those meetings, and then all of a sudden, it was, how do we expand on this? And it just so happens that we were already in the planning stages of our new headquarters rollout, which is a greenfield rollout that just we had our grand opening last week, and we planned our designs, the actual physical room designs around that service as well. So that gave us the opportunity to, as a company, adopt prior to the build out, and of course making that transition even easier so that the room is accommodated or catered to Zoom service as a whole.
That's really great. Well, I know that we've been talking about a lot of little challenges here and there, but it seems like we've got a strong fan base on the stage. But again, I want to be very transparent and open with our audience. I'd like to go ahead and encourage my panelists to be able to go ahead and share maybe an aha moment or something that you didn't plan for, that you really kind of maybe had to do a little fire drill to go ahead and resolve. But we want to go ahead and make sure that everybody is as prepared for those moments in the case that they may encounter that during their deployments. Maybe Kelley, do you have?
So one of the things that we did was we connected Zoom with our single sign-on. And so at the university, at our university, we call it your Link Blue ID. But so that's kind of your username and password to get into everything. And so one of the things, so we went ahead and added that to Zoom to make it easy so people didn't have to have a separate username and password for it. But one of the challenges that we found is that a lot of times people just don't remember the URL or didn't download the client to their desktop because they have their own methods of doing things. So a lot of times they'll just Google Zoom, and then they'll sign in with their email address. And then all of a sudden they're contacting me in a panic because it's 40 minutes into their meeting, and they're like, oh no, it tells me my meeting's going to expire. Where's my pro account? So just kind of knowing to get people to make sure that they understand how they're coming into the meetings, and to go ahead and either download the client or bookmark the URL for our page. If they go to our, we have a page, very nice page set up, and so all they do is click sign in there. That was definitely one of the challenges that we faced.
Michael, anything you want to
A similar situation, and that was a learning curve for us as well. The initial rollout, we tried to do our quasi-math on the number of host licenses based on employee count. And so we took a swag and said, let's try 50%, see how this works. SSO enabled, and sure enough, they went out like candy, and everyone wanted one. So I had to amend our purchase very quickly after that, knowing full well that we were not going to make the target. So in terms of SSO enablement, it makes it a whole lot easier for people to get in and start hosting their meetings. But also on the back end, in terms of administration, you got to be mindful of what do you do when you run out of available host licenses, and how do you manage that without exceeding the appropriate math applied to you from the finance aspects of it. So we're still struggling with that. There's a few back end tricks that we're looking into, and this is the beauty of Zoom. Not to sound biased, but this is a bad situation with a good answer to it too, is you can easily program back-end management of that if you have either programmers on board or hire a consultant that can enable, let's say, end users that haven't used their host account for quantity X days, and you want to transition that back to a basic account so you can free up that license for redistribution. That's simple enough to do in the back end.
Well, for Medallia, I would say, and specifically within my department at the time, our biggest challenge was the very first time we tried to roll out Zoom, which was kind of an interesting problem. We had a mix of Polycom hardware, some old on-premise Polycom, and we were using life-size as well. And when we first brought in Zoom, we thought, oh, well, we'll just replace these old Polycom units. They're only being used a little bit, no big deal. We'll still have life-size as our primary platform. This will be great. This will just be like a trial, and it'll be a beta. Sort of our own fault is we didn't quite realize exactly how much those Polycoms were being used. And so when we just pulled them out and put the Zoom platform in, we thought, oh, this will be great. It was a little test. And we got no end of flack and engineers yelling at us going, why is this not working? Why did you take this away? What is this new platform? And so there was some pushback on that. And we did have actually some quality problems with it to start through a combination of a couple of different reasons, but primarily because one of our remote offices had solid glass offices, right? And it turns out that all of a sudden we had to become physicists and figure out sound reflectivity and echoing and stuff that was not directly related to the platform or the problem or the hardware, but the actual environment that we were in. So we were calling up vendors and looking at sound paneling, and as soon as we told them that we had glass rooms, they were kind of laughing hysterically at us. There's not a lot you can do about that. But we ended up basically pausing the Zoom rollout in the first sort of initial trial, and we just kind of left it alone. And from there, we really had to work first impressions, right? I mean, there was a few key people within the company that were very adamant that they were never going to look at Zoom again. They were fully convinced it was Zoom's problem, and it took a lot of explaining and coordinating to convince them that the software on top of the hardware, right? There's two different variables here, right? And then you add the environment as a third different variable. With a little bit of luck, we decided to move buildings, which kind of helps. And then also, there was just a lot of that humility, or that humble, right, of basically having to go back and explain to leadership, hey, we took a chance and we screwed up. Sorry, we understand this has a business impact, but we can make this better in the long run, because at the time they're like, no, we're not going to use Zoom at all. And I said, well, you still have your problems though, right? Just because we did a trial to try to fix some of your problems, right, that they were having, and that trial didn't work, doesn't mean that your problems didn't go away. So at the time, we actually ended up doing a lot more comparative tests, right? So we brought in life-size, we brought in Polycom, we brought in Cisco, we brought in GoToMeeting, who was developing a conference room solution. We were looking at on-premise solutions, and it really did take a lot of not exactly full double-blind tests, but sit in the room, do the call, sit in the room, look at the statistics. And that kind of helped us a lot doing very data-driven analysis and very data-driven decision-making, right? So from that point, we could actually decide, we can show, look, these 10 calls had far fewer drops, right? These 10 calls had much better adoption and much better audio quality. And we even did stress testing, which I thought was hysterical, was Hamilton Gordon, who I mentioned was our director of AV and collaboration, was driving down the freeway 101 with his cell phone mounted on the car dash, right, doing a full video call in front of our CFO. And it was like, okay, this works, right? There's no question, we can actually do this.
I'd like to note we're not advising anybody to go drive down the road 10 and 2,
Yeah.
8 and 4, whatever you prefer. But we are definitely recognized for our mobile application as well. So I know that we've gone through a lot of different challenges. There was a lot of planning implemented. How did each organization here measure their success? I mean, there isn't going to be this bell or gong that rings at the end of the day, but how do we know, how did each organization here determine that you're moving in the right direction? Maybe Michael, we can have you go ahead and start.
I think for us, the proof was in the pudding, especially with the tough sell organizations who adopted and were able to put that in writing, to simply get your sales organization to say, hey, we've been using this, it's a marked improvement from the previous, or in the case of Zoom Room deployments where we were previously H323, Polycom-based, and the challenges associated with those designs. Again, having the advantage of doing a pilot and then literally a pilot building prior to us building out our headquarters to try different types of solutions with the actual service itself, and then come to the realization that the Zoom Room complements the suite so well, and from a price point, you can design the rooms so that it meets the customer objectives. What I mean by that is you're going to have customers that are going to want face tracking, for instance, and clearly that's something that's not out of the box for a Zoom Room deployment, but we were able to work that into certain designs. Or you're going to have customers that want it as simple as possible, meaning there's nothing on the table. Can you incorporate everything just in the display? And we're able to achieve that as well. Contingency planning is something that I hold dear, and even though with Zoom and the Zoom Room design being so comprehensive, there's always going to be a time where something's not going to work, whether that's a disconnected cable and the iPad controller is no longer available. We've baked some of these designs to have contingencies already in, so we still have a separate telephony system that ties into our back-end PBX. They can easily make a phone call to the same Zoom service and use the same meeting ID, and we also have the contingency hardwire HDMI to the table. So rather than using the wireless AV capabilities of the Zoom Room itself, since let's just say it's not available, they plug into that hardwire, and without having to press a button, pops up on the screen. So the rooms, technically the majority of our cookie cutter rooms are capable of supporting two methods of connectivity while utilizing the same service. So I think our biggest challenge today really is convincing our end users that video is the primary option, whereas some of them are still quite content with just making the phone call. And that becomes evident with our overall spend with the number of minutes that we're doing on the audio side of the equation. But again, that's a learning curve that we'd have to just teach our culture to embrace a bit further.
For us, it was really probably the single biggest, from an IT support measurement, is the lack of noise, right? I mean, we watched our ticket volume drop down, we watched the hallway conversations go away, and really it was kind of a nice feeling to literally this last week wake up and see that our only problem with conferencing now was when somebody yanked the power cable from the iPad. I'm thinking super glue next week, but it's nice to see that the adoption is there, the usage is there, it continually steadily grows up and goes up more and more. But really just the to paraphrase, right, the it just works kind of mindset and mentality around the platform. And the sort of the trust in the platform is really nice. And for us, watching our support tickets just basically disappear when it comes to Zoom, other than very specific hardware-related issues, it's great, right? I mean, that's really kind of the best thing, right? IT people are lazy in some cases. The less I have to do, the better, right? If I don't have to go fix a room, great.
If I can add one other item that is worth mentioning, when you say measurement of success, we use Zoom to host our corporate all-hands meeting. And I have the staff that actually drives it here. And this was something that we didn't anticipate early on because we had previously approached it from a CDN standpoint, build out YouTube for the enterprise. And my previous life, that's exactly what we did and the complexities associated. And here we are today at Palo Alto Networks, literally hosting a live broadcast of our executive staff to the rest of the company successfully, the various locations or the remote participants. And I think that would be the pinnacle of the success factor for Zoom and how we've been able to implement it. Because I honestly did not anticipate that to be the case. And we're going on a full year's worth of broadcasts through Zoom using the webinar option with our CEO front and center, our production team, and taking that program out literally off of a laptop with, again, a contingency laptop just in case, which we've never had to use. But literally, if something went wrong with that laptop, I just simply go, well, the team simply goes, boop, we're back up and running.
The sound comes with that too. Boop.
I actually ditto that because we've had a huge journey from our big worldwide company events, and now they're all run on Zoom webinar. So.
Kelly?
For us, we really measured success based on the people that were using it. So I mentioned before that in July, after making the announcement in April, we had 250 users. We actually ran out of licenses in October of that year. And so we had to, so the first thing we did was we were mean and we said, okay, who hasn't used it in a while? And we freed up about 20 accounts just so that we could have time to go ahead and contact our purchasing office and to go ahead and make that next purchase. And honestly, like half the people that we took accounts away from within 2 weeks noticed we took their accounts and like requested them back. So I was like, okay, so they're paying attention and they miss it when they don't have it. So that was great. The other thing that I was able to do, so our initial foray with Zoom was we decided we'd try 500 licenses for a year and just see what it looked like at the end of that year. And so what I had to do is probably starting in March was sit down with my purchasing team and say, here's our adoption. This is many accounts we're adding per month. This is our growth. This is what this will cost if we continue to grow with this rate. And so we actually decided to go ahead and go with the full site license for all the faculty and all the students at the University of Kentucky. So I checked last week. We had almost 4,000. Almost 4,000 people, who had pro accounts at UK, so that was very cool. And then for us, now our challenge is like, how do we promote it to the other people who haven't heard about it yet? So.
Great. Well, thank you so much, panelists, for sharing your experiences. We definitely want to go ahead and give the audience an opportunity to ask questions as needed. So we're just going to go ahead and have one of my teammates, Scott, walk around the room. So please kindly raise your hand. He'll go ahead and pass over the mic so that you can go ahead and audibly ask your questions.
Hello, Dan Kurchak. I'm the CEO of telemedicine.com, and we do a lot of telemedicine consultations, obviously over video, between patients and specialists all over the globe. And one of the questions I have for you is, being a tech person, and I've looked under the hood quite a bit at Zoom, and couldn't figure out how between all these other services when I was beta testing between switching over to using Zoom is noticed, wow, when we have latency and degradation, how does it still remain up on a call when we're reaching such high levels of latency? What I've noticed is, and I don't know, the question is, do you still remove, what I noticed is all the other cloud services would first drop frame rate. And Zoom instantly would drop resolution was what I noticed, and that was very intelligent in how it did that portion of it. But what the question is there an option or something coming soon, software-wise or moving forward, where I as the end user can choose, hey, I don't care if the frame rate drops to 5 frames a second, I'd rather have resolution remain the highest resolution because I might be doing pathology, biopsy, looking at higher quality where that's important to me during that call. Currently isn't there, and I'm wondering what your options are, and for folks like me to give you that feedback to see in new revs of software if that could be something where I could choose.
Yeah, that's definitely a great question, and we really definitely appreciate the product feedback. Just to go ahead and let you know that as of right now, as far as feature requests, we'll go ahead and take those offline. So happy to go ahead and get your contact information, and we can have a closer discussion in regards to our roadmap items and see how we may be able to prioritize those features. So if you don't mind, we'll go ahead and collect your contact information at the end of the session, and I'll make sure to keep in touch with you.
Great, thank you.
Can you +1 me for that?
Yes.
Okay, cool.
It takes a village, so please, your feedback is welcome.
My name is Jacob Phillips. I'm the Director of IT Support at a company called Clearlink based out of Salt Lake. My question's for Michael. You talk about contingency plans in the rooms, HDMI, phone. How do you prevent your users that may have come in and had a bad user experience because they just don't come to the trainings and learn how to use the tool from immediately going, oh, I don't like Zoom, I'm going to go right to the HDMI or go to the phone?
That's a very good question, and we took an approach where we tried to minimize having to provide any training documentation or how-to, because that typically inundates people, and oftentimes they're not going to follow it. They're going to follow their peers and colleagues that are in the room and what their best practices are, and that's what we tend to see, and so the adoption is what we're counting on. But you're right. I mean, people have certain behaviors that they're used to following, and so what we try to do from a design standpoint is make it discrete. That HDMI is not clearly visible unless you're lifting something to get that HDMI cable. And or the phone interface itself for some of the rooms is a dial pad, but we didn't provide any informational sheets on that. We provided a simple how-to sheet just for the iPad controller. So the intent being is the rooms are more than capable of that contingency, but only use it in case of emergency is really the approach we're taking.
And just to chime in, I don't know but from a Medallia perspective approach, we actually just kind of took the leap of faith. We sort of ripped the Band-Aid off, and we were planning on putting the HDMI cables in the room, and then also tying the iPad into the phone system. And literally, I think it was about a week before on launch day, we were looking at the logistics of it and getting it all wired up, and we just said, forget it. People are either going to learn or they're not. And thankfully, most people do, right? So trying to design for the smaller use case of people not wanting to do it versus just bringing them along for the ride. We chose to go for the ride.
Hi, I'm David from Marvell here in Santa Clara. Quick question. We all know that Zoom has video conferencing and meeting as far as solutions. As far as chat, is that something you also kind of apply to your environment and how you migrated or had your users adopt to Zoom as chat, or did you retain your same chat service within your environment?
So I can chime in a little bit just to go ahead and let you know, we actually have a wonderful session that's going to be held by one of my personal clients, Genesis Healthcare. We are double downing on chat. You'll see that in our latest desktop client that there has been a significant enhancement to our chat capabilities. We do definitely encourage our panelists as well as any clients to go ahead and continue to use whatever application of chat that they currently like to. And we're a strong believer in earning your business and for you to naturally realize that we are going ahead and enhancing that experience. And you'll soon see that Zoom's chat will definitely be able to compete with a lot of the big players out there such as Slack, or HipChat, and other applications. So I think that as of right now, as a customer success advisor, I encourage our companies to go ahead and make that decision themselves because we want to make sure that, because chat is such an important component for those quick conversations and those quick collaborations, we don't want to interrupt that because getting somebody's face to be on video is one thing, and so we need to take baby steps at a time. But if any of our panelists have something else to add, I'd love to hear as well.
I do want to impart, for Dave's question, we have multiple tools for that specific reason because, and I think unified communications is the misnomer, right, in our situation. We've got Slack, we've got Skype, we've got Zoom with chat enabled, and our end users pick and choose, and I have to have, and Ring Central for my cloud PBX. We choose what we want to use, but eventually the company is going to make a decision based on those features that best suits our needs. And right now, that's still, I think, the next chasm that we're going to cross in terms of Palo Alto.
I will say say at the University of Kentucky, it's a very decentralized sort of model. So we do have central IT, and so really when it comes to like big purchasing decisions or things like that, IT looks at those things, but for the most part, we try to be, I try to be soft and kind, and if someone wants to use something, that may, we're like, yeah, sure, go for it if that works for you and your team, your college. We have 18 different colleges at our university, so they're like 18 individual island nations, and they kind of do their own thing, and so, the less draconian that we can feel about things, is better. So usually when it comes to like big purchases, like the learning management system or web conferencing system, you can't have 18 of them. But certainly, when it comes to things like that, we try to just support people kind of whatever they want to use.
I can tell you that of those multiple clients, though, they all have one thing in common, which is it's very easy to start Zoom in all of them, from what we've noticed.
Yeah.
I didn't pay him to say that.
No, she didn't.
Just throw it out there. I think we have room for one more question.
Hi, Joan Trabucco with VMware Sourcing. We're in the pilot phase right now with Zoom, and I'm wondering if there's been any impact to your network bandwidth with degradation to the network. I'm not a technical person, but I'm just interested, as we roll that out, will we see any of that with more adoption of video?
Well, we're a little lucky and unlucky, actually, because we just got a brand new building with a whole bunch of fiber and big high bandwidth. So in our headquarters, we don't really have that problem. In our remote offices, especially, we have an office down in Argentina, we actually were a little concerned about that because they had such an unreliable internet connection and bandwidth. But really, and especially because it's sort of the adaptive HD algorithms that Zoom uses, it never really came up. We were kind of concerned about it, but really, it's so good at utilizing the bandwidth that's available, it never really became a problem.
It would be fair to say that's the secret sauce, per se, but it does have its limitations, not knowing what your network comprises of. Bandwidth will always play a role. The good news is bandwidth is, at least in our environment, coming down in price and becoming more readily available in different avenues of approach in terms of how we look at bandwidth, not in the traditional sense, but definitely do the assessment on how much bandwidth based on the quantity of headcount and the associated concurrent connections that you anticipate out of those office locations.
And you kind of figure if you can allocate enough bandwidth for all of your employees to listen to Spotify and iTunes, hopefully you can squeeze in enough for a video call.
The overhead.
Yeah, exactly.
And I will say that on our campus, like I spoke about all the 18 different colleges, the buildings and the ages and the amount of ports and things that are, it just varies so much. And I don't have a technical background, but it's never been an issue. So that when it goes back to the it just works thing, it just works. And it also works for our students that are at home or students that are joining from the Starbucks or from the McDonald's in some of our rural areas. So we've always just gotten the feedback that it works.
So we are coming to the tail end of our panel session. I'd like to go ahead and open up for our panelists to just go ahead and give out one last words of wisdom that you'd like to share, anything that you think that our attendees here could be able to gain value from, as well as those of us who are watching this online.
I'll start. So I would just advise you to not be so worried about changing all the time. If it's a better tool, people will be thankful and grateful. They might grumble in the beginning, but at the end, if it's truly a better solution for them, they'll eventually figure it out, and they'll be glad that you brought this to them.
Yeah, especially if you're internal to in IT and you're worried about systems and customer support, sooner or later you got to throw it against the wall and try it. Right? That's really the best solution you can. And the sooner you can get it out to people and get them involved in it and bring them into being stakeholders, better off it's going to be, the easier it's going to be.
Let's just make it the trifecta, and yes, take the risk. It's going to be associated anytime you deploy a new tool, but like something specific is be mindful of, if you're deploying Zoom rooms, be mindful of that power cable to that iPad. It has a tendency of being unplugged magically.
Not involving any human behaviors, right? Again, thank you everybody for attending our panel session today. Again, thank you to my panelists for sharing your wealth of knowledge and being vulnerable to sharing your specific details of your experiences. We hope that the next generation of Zoomers have gained the knowledge needed to be most prepared to execute their next deployments.